everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are delighted to welcome you to one of our first single genre MSWL Live Panels. More than 1,500 of you voted for Memoir, and we are so happy to be here and have so many stories in this room. I'm Jessica Sinsheimer, agent at Context Literary and co-founder of MSWL, Manuscript Wishlist, and our educational sister company, the Manuscript Academy. We are a way to find agents, a way to get help directly from agents, and a community of, if we dare say so, some of the most talented and lovely folks in the business. Over to you, Julie.
I think we do dare say that.
Yes.
So I'm Julie Kingsley. I am co-founder of the Manuscript Academy, a longtime screenwriting professor, a writer. Today is all about finding what agents want within genres so you can better understand their tastes, trends within the game, and how agents think.
And first, I'd like to introduce our panel of amazing agents. Thank you all so much for being here. They're here to share their best tips and tricks, teach a class for you, talk about platform, and what they predict for memoirs in 2025.
So come on down, panel. First up, we have Taj McCoy of Laura Dahl Literary Agency. Taj, tell us about you. What's on your memoir MSWL this year?
Oh, goodness. So hi, everyone. I'm Taj. I am, very excited to be here. Thank y'all for joining us today. In terms of memoirs specifically, I'm looking for, things that really share relatable voices, things that are coming from places of connection, and also just really unique ways of sharing something new. I think that the hardest part is, everybody has a story to tell. And so trying to make sure that it's something that is what publishers will see as marketable in the industry, that's the hard part. And so I'm glad to be here today to talk to you all about that.
Yay! And I am pleased to welcome Katharine Sands, dear friend and former colleague. Katharine, tell us about you and what's on your MSWL this year.
Hello, literati. In terms of memoir, femoir, and himoir, I would be very excited to see a memoir with a mission, maybe from an activist or an educator or some kind of underdog. A memoir that does double duty, that tells a compelling personal story, but also maybe highlights something of a much larger universal nature. We're always looking for addiction memoirs, some of the big themes, caregiving, end of life, cultural identity, and sometimes just a powerful, magical voice is what I look for at the Sarah Jane Fryman Literary Agency.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Katharine. And last and certainly not least, we have Stephanie Winter, KO Media Management. Stephanie, what's on your memoir MSWL?
Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie, of course. So I am looking very similarly to Katharine, this term called Memoir Plus. So those things that have that very captivating story on a personal level, but have a broader application to bring in an audience that maybe isn't quite as narrowed or specific as a single topic of a memoir. This can be anything from like a literary and upmarket style for myself personally. And I'm also looking for something that can have like a clear takeaway for the reader, almost like a dual purpose. I love creative nonfiction across the board. So things that play with magical realism, speculative elements, and sort of crafting that in the way that you shape your structure of your storytelling are all really interesting to me. So I would love to see more of that, more of the literary canon, literary criticism, discourse, and memoir. Things like that are very much up my alley.
I love that. Thank you all so much for being here. Now, a question for the entire panel. All of the questions are giant and, in a sense, impossible because all of publishing is subjective. But according to each of you, what is working for memoirs in 2025?
I'll jump on it. A good memoir in 2025 doesn't just tell the story. It tells us why the story matters now. Why is it resonant? Because readers are looking for more than the life chronicle. They want that resonance. So the best memoirs have a strong narrative arc, but also emotional insight, not just what happened, but what it meant. Every agent is always thinking as they read your query letter, why you, why now?
Very much agree. Memoirs are so often serving a broader purpose than what's personal to the author. And the publishing teams are always trying to figure out what are the several ways to position a book to capture the biggest audience. So to be able to have it really transparently on the page show not just the personal elements, but also how there is a larger discourse happening that really brings people to your book, will also help sell your book down the line as well.
I think I completely agree with my colleagues here. And what I would add is, having a thought as you're writing your memoirs about who your primary target audience is and who those secondary audiences are. It really helps to have those identified so that we get a sense of, on a broader scale, who all could be reached and touched by the story. And so in what ways would we be able to position it? Because as you're pitching it to us, we then need to pitch it to publishers, and then they need to pitch it to their teams so that we get all of that buy-in. And so that piece is really important.
I love that. Okay, so as we know, memoir is nonfiction. As we know, people who work on nonfiction tend to like a platform without breaking any hearts. What should everyone expect from themselves in terms of platform? What are agents expecting in terms of platform? And how can writers get there?
That is a good question. I think it kind of goes into two categories for me with memoir. You can have a fantastic platform, or you could have none at all and still sell. If you don't have a platform, I always am looking for, how are you showing that you're the expert of the material that you're talking about? And then also, how are you flagging, similar to what we all pretty much answered with the first question, how are you flagging that there is a large audience here, that even if you don't have a platform to drive to your book, that there is a natural one to find your book? So if you don't have a platform, or you have one that maybe feels modest and you want to build one, I would say be authentic to yourself. Find the things that you enjoy doing online, if at all. It might not even be strict social media. It might be, publishing and journal articles and things like that. And really funnel your efforts into a way that you enjoy building a portfolio. It matters more that you have engagement and sort of that expertise in some circles than it does platform, if you're not shooting for platform.
I would add something I love to share about platform. Platform it has two meanings. It might be a byline or your fame or, TikTok followers, but at the same time, it's all about community engagement. So if you're doing a memoir about surviving breast cancer or going through a divorce or raising gluten-free children, there's a community that you're part of, and that's part of your platform. You don't only want to think numerically, you want to think about the community. And I always think of the word YOU in the middle of that. How are you part of something, a voice of something, a face of something? And how are you connecting with people who would be your obvious readers, what we might call the primary readership?
I love the you in the middle of community. For me, I think one of the things to really think about is, what is your goal for the memoir? At the end of it, do you want to have a bunch of speaking engagements? Like what is it that you want to do with this thing that you're putting together? And so if it's something where you're trying to, build so that you have the ability to go and do speaking, sometimes people will, really get their start on podcasts. Sometimes people will start to host lives on TikTok. Sometimes it's just about getting that voice out there so that people get familiar with you, so that when you do have that thing to sell, they're there and ready and waiting for you. And so even if you're in a position where you're building, it's just a sense of, well, what is your plan? How do you see yourself continuing to build? How are you going to progress that build? If you are, already a writer and you love to do op-eds and things like that, and you are a subject matter expert based on your experiences, based on your field, having op-eds in specific areas. We see people putting things into magazines, into literary journals, into, newspapers, and we're able to see, like the following that can gain. The more often that you're invited back to do follow-ups and other things that are kind of tangential to what your topic is, that can be really helpful too. So getting a sense of how you're building those connections and relationships, that's going to go into that proposal that then tells us more about your audience and your connections.
I love that reframe, how it's connections and relationships and community, and not how many billions of followers can you have or else. Good, an optimistic reframe. Okay, Just one more question before we get started. If any of you have questions for our panel, look for the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll be choosing those later. Okay, one final question. What is your number one tip for memoir writers?
I will grab that. I love to teach this if I teach a workshop. Download pictures from the internet or cut them out of magazines, the pictures of your ideal readers. Make an audience on the wall. It will transform your writing because you were there and you're looking backwards at your memoir. Your reader can only move forward. And it really helps to test it on that focus group, to really look them in the eyes and start to think a few things. Am I going to resonate more with perhaps older people or women more than men? Whatever you might learn from that audience, but especially it will help your mindset because there's nothing more difficult than writing memoir when you were there. You see it, but you've got to put us, your readers, behind your eyeballs so that we see it, so that we're really immersed in a scene that may have taken place a long time ago. And an audience on the wall will help you do that automatically.
I love that. That is such a good idea. And I would be the first person to start printing things off and putting them on. It's beautiful. I think in addition to that, I would say, like, if you can try to sort of get into the idea that this is creative nonfiction and sort of not, if possible, don't feel contained by that idea of this is how it happened chronologically. I need to really hit all the beats in a very literal way. You're still crafting a really compelling story, and you can take liberty with structure and how you're telling it, and sort of playing with the creativeness that comes from crafting a story and retelling it. It can feel a little bit sometimes like you want to get stuck in the literal version of how you would first put it on paper. But when you're doing your second and third drafts, you can play with the line editing. You can play with the structure of your work. There are ways to sort of elevate the experience for the reader as they're reading it.
I think that's great. And I feel like mine just piggybacks right off of that. I think, as you're putting together, your story, think about what you want the readers to take away from it in terms of, is this meant to be a point of relation? Is it meant to also give them some tips, some ideas on how to face certain circumstances? What is it that you want them to come away with? Because sometimes having a sense of what you want the takeaways to be can help you in making that structure.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so on with the show. First off, we have Taj McCoy. Taj, come on down. And can't wait.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I purposefully decided to hide all of the millions of tabs that I have open so that I don't scare anybody.
Perfect.
Okay. So we're really just talking about nonfiction proposals today. A lot of times I will open my inbox and receive a memoir query, but it doesn't necessarily mention anything about a proposal or include one. And so let's just talk really briefly about what a book proposal is specifically and why they're required for nonfiction projects. And this is specifically, obviously, in traditional publishing. Proposals can help us demonstrate an author's subject matter expertise, a book's potential marketability, and a vision for a project so that as we're thinking about the marketability of something, how will we be able to position it? Who is it intended for? In what ways can we, really creatively pitch this so that editors really want to pick it up and get through those pages? Oftentimes, nonfiction works can be sold with a proposal and just a few completed sample chapters. So unlike fiction, right, the full manuscript doesn't necessarily have to be complete. A lot of times I will receive a full manuscript for a memoir, but there won't be anything in terms of a proposal. And that's the part that I actually really need. And so if a memoir is fully written, I don't need a proposal. Not true. So as we are looking at this thing, each literary agent is going to approach this differently in terms of how they manage their inbox and what they initially require for a query. Some are going to just want sample pages up front. Some are going to say proposal only up front. Some may say, I just want the initial overview and I'll let you know if I want pages or a proposal. And so you want to make sure that whatever it is they're asking for, that's what you give them. I do have a lot of times where I receive something I didn't ask for, but I don't get any of the things that I did. And in those instances, it to me, it's just an incomplete query. And so I'm going to move on to the next. And so it's highly possible that it'll just be passed upon if it's not what was requested. And so because a proposal is ultimately going to be necessary, and because some will require it up front, it's best to begin the process of compiling your research and project plan as you're putting together your story. And why? Well, in today's market, memoirs can be a tough sell. I don't want to scare you, but I do want to be honest with you, right? And so if we think about this, of the 8 billion people on Earth, everyone has a story. Everyone has something that they could share. And so what we're trying to do in the traditional market is create buy-in. So we want strong proposals that help equip agents for pitching to those editors who then have to pitch in those acquisition meetings. And sometimes those meetings will include the sales team, the marketing team. They may include the actual publisher over the imprint and others who may have to all agree before something can move forward. And that may actually take multiple meetings to get to that yes. And so in trying to make that strong proposal, basically you're giving folks what they need to really advocate on behalf of the story. And so as long as that proposal gives that clear vision with easily identifiable audiences, it gives them a sense of how to try to quantify their sales projections. That makes their job a little bit easier, and it gets them closer to a yes, even though, obviously yeses are not guaranteed. And so what should a proposal include? Typical components may be an overview of the project itself, information about you, your bio, comparable titles. Think about, what other things are recent on the market, recent within 2-3 years, maybe, ideally. But also not just which ones are similar, but how is yours different? In what ways can you differentiate so that they see that there's a fresh voice there? In terms of a marketing and publicity plan, those contacts that you may have, if you have written a bunch of op-eds, if you have a podcast, what does that following look like? In terms of social media and platform, what have you built thus far? If you have this really incredible Substack and this amazing following, or this giant Patreon, or whatever the case may be, making sure that you're sharing those things and giving a sense of what kinds of touches you have with these different communities, these different audiences that you've identified. And then in addition to those things, you're going to have a detailed chapter outline. So we have a sense of the structure of what you have coming, assuming that this is not complete. And then you're going to have sample pages, 3 to 5 complete chapters that give editors, agents a sense of your voice, that give them a sense of how this information is going to be delivered and in what ways they can anticipate the rest of those summaries coming together. And so another myth, I can self-select which components to submit for that query. I think we already addressed this, but that is false. And so, as you're thinking about those submission requirements, agents tell you upfront what they want to receive in their inboxes when it comes to the projects that they're looking to consider. Any incomplete submission is something that may not be considered at all. It may be immediately sent back. It may be something that just, kind of falls through the cracks, depending on whether that agent is someone that responds to every query or not. It may just go unanswered. And so just like agents are looking for revised and polished manuscripts on the fiction side, they're looking for revised and polished materials on the nonfiction side too. And so in what ways can we make sure that that proposal is really, really strong? I mean, the Manuscript Academy is a great place to try to find their answers to those questions. And that is it for me. So thank you guys for listening. Let me get out of just start sharing my screen.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question from the chat. How long is the detailed chapter outline for each chapter? 300 words, 1,000 words?
You don't necessarily need that many just to describe your chapter itself. I've seen ones where it's a strong paragraph. I think 300 words is probably more than you need, but I have seen some that go to that level of detail. It just depends, because sometimes people will have a unique formatting system for their particular memoir. So I would say use your best judgment, but you want them to get the gist of what's going to be covered and maybe how.
Okay, and just a few more questions while we are on the
Sure.
topic of how to pitch, how to write your pitch, how to do this proposal for the book description, project overview in the query letter. I've heard that
Yeah.
different agents prefer having a synopsis versus a half synopsis versus jacket cover description. Which do you prefer in the query letter, and how do I know what an agent actually prefers?
That's a great question. I think it's really hard to know what every single person's going to prefer. Look at their submission requirements. Hopefully, it gives you a sense of what it is they're specifically looking for. For me, I think in terms of what you're including in the query letter itself, it can be something like jacket copy, where you're kind of giving an overview that kind of gets to the premise of the story, as well as including some of those details in terms of what the intention of it is. And then obviously the proposal will get into the nuts and bolts of everything. But I definitely think that's subjective, and Stephanie and Katharine may have very different feelings about that than I do.
I really align with you. I prefer something that feels a little bit more like a traditional book jacket query kind of style. But if you're breaking the if a submission asks for 3 paragraphs, I'm not going to be upset if you've given me a couple extra bullet points of some of the specifics of what you're diving into. But yeah, I like the idea of like getting a sense of how you're pitching it helps me understand how you want a reader to receive the work as well.
You're muted, Katharine.
I
Yes,
did it.
you can-
Oh,
there you go.
sorry, I'm a total Luddite. I can't particularly work a computer, but I know it works when it works. I love to make the joke. It's like the Supreme Court definition of pornography. You know it when you see it. It's not a formatting thing for many of us. I'm not particularly numeric. I mean, it works strictly on voice and story. Is there some compelling element that's jumping out? And it does happen fast. 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs will do the job. Is this an interesting perch? Is this something very fresh? Would people respond to it? So it's not really because it's closer to book jacket copy than not. Any kind of pitch or querying works on the same principle. Is there something, that pops, something that grabs you, that hooks you? The other joke I make everywhere is you have to be a happy hooker. The hook is very clear when there is one, when it's publishable.
Thank you. And I know it's so frustrating that it seems like every agent wants something slightly different. I know that is like so much pressure to put on all of you. I'm so sorry that's how it is right now. I will say I don't think anyone's going to reject you for getting something slightly wrong in terms of format if they like your story and they like your writing. So please don't worry too much. Do your best. But I just can't imagine someone being like, well, I love the writing, but they told me too much about what's going to happen in the book. So
Right.
I don't think that will happen. Okay, and then just one more question while we are on format, then we'll move right along. For memoir, does a synopsis substitute for a chapter outline? Or can an author substitute a synopsis for a chapter outline?
I think it depends. And I think that's going to come down to preference for the agents. I find that a chapter outline tends to tell me chapter by chapter what's going to happen, whereas a synopsis might give me an overview, but it's not going to necessarily show me the organization part. And I tend to like that specifically when it comes to nonfiction.
Wonderful. Taj, thank you so much for this beautiful overview and class. Very educational. We love this. We love education here.
I appreciate
Next, thank you. Yay. Next up, we have Katharine Sands here to talk about her ideal memoir client. Katharine, come on down.
Well, hello. My ideal client, I will share with you, is someone who has very recently found the perfect editor in Ariel Curry at Source Books, and her name is Kara Kavinsky. Her forthcoming book is Tell Me About Joy, and I will read to you a few sentences from her query and then deconstruct it for you and why she's my ideal client. It says, she introduces her work and says it's a memoir, but it's dominantly a love story. During an interview for a cover story on a widowed World War II veteran named Bob, I was asked to find the love of his life, a woman named Joy. He had not spoken of her for over 67 years. At that moment, my personal circumstances could not have been more contrasting. I was struggling to heal from decades of abuse. A frail nonagenarian surprisingly impacted my life by sending me on a journey to find joy at a time when I needed it the most. It is a wildly improbable love story of the miraculous reuniting of long-lost loves after nearly 7 decades apart. I fall in love with stories, and through the eyes of a World War II veteran, I learned to fall in love with myself. She had me at hello. That's all it takes. She's an ideal client because she has something very special to share. She's incredibly brave as a memoirist. And of course, all people sharing memoir material are brave, but she's sharing her deepest soul. There are several things I think you learned from this, and those are some buzzwords for me. One is urgency. Why is this story urgent? Before I use the word resonant, but you see very quickly it is urgent. Look at what's at stake here. Stakes is another big word for me in reading queries and selecting clients. What's at stake for her? And we have this wonderful dual narrative in a sense. We're going to get a love story. It somewhat hints to the fact that there may be a happy or bittersweet ending here. This is going to be a voyage and a journey, another key word for me, journey. What it's the memoir is going to journey through. And you may know the difference between autobiography and memoir. Autobiography might be a whole life usually because of a celebrity or business tycoon or someone very media oriented. But a memoir could be 3 days in your life. It could be from high school to college. It could be how you became a surgeon. It could be a caretaking journey. So journey is a key word. You really want to understand that you're showcasing the arc of your memoir. And you can do that so quickly. And here, Kara Kavinsky has done this so beautifully. And it just brings out the voice, the soul, the heart of the writer. And it also has this fresh, unusual story. Obviously, there are a million love stories out there, but there's something about a man in his 90s who has not seen a woman he's pined for 67 years. I mean, I found that just so extraordinary. And the story is extraordinary. And Kara was just a really wonderful professional to work with, in every way responsive and trusting and, keen for the job. You have to also understand that even if this is the most powerful personal journey, personal experience that you've ever been through, you want the job. Being an author is a job. You're going to have to speak about your work hundreds of times. You're going to have to appeal to readers and want to. I tell clients, you have to be an impassioned ambassador for your work. So it travels from you yourself to the shelf. And I have a couple of formulas also to apply. I knew from the queries she was based in Indiana, but the formula is place, person, pivot. Where am I? Who do I meet? And what is a dynamic turn of the screw that starts the story in motion? And you see all this in the paragraph. We know exactly who this woman is. We understand what the pivot is. She sets forth on a journey. And then there's some other things to think about when it comes to memoir, being an ideal client for an agent at this earliest stage. And that is the interior journey and the exterior journey. And here we have really rich, resonant, juicy material for both. How the journalist goes in search of joy is going to be interesting. At the same time, we understand that we're coming into her life at a time when life is not exactly showing her the best side, and that she learns to fall in love with herself. So we have two story arcs. And sometimes with memoir, you find yourself thinking as an agent, would this be a terrific article or podcast, but there might not be enough to sustain a book-length work. But here you see immediately that there is. So I get voice, I get urgency, I get stakes. I get, in the case of Kara Kavinsky, a lovely professional who's going to go the distance. She isn't writing just for herself. She's writing for her readers, for that audience I was talking about. making on your wall. So that would be an ideal example of a client.
Wonderful. And what was the title again, Katharine?
It is now called Tell Me About Joy, and it's coming in 2026.
Wow, congratulations.
Very proud agent mama.
Aw, that's nice. Okay, so from the audience, you had mentioned sending out this work, finding the perfect home for it. The question is, once you've taken on an author, how do you determine what publishers are a best match for the memoir?
It's a combination of long-term relationships and a hat pin and an atlas. Today the directories are very easy to find. You really do a submission strategy, and that is you research in several ways. One of them might be Publishers Marketplace. One of them might be manuscript wish list. You try to get a real bead on what someone is likely to acquire, and of course you have relationships and. We spend our days trying to track what editors are acquiring. What do they want? What don't they want? Why would something appeal to an editor? And it's still very formal in that you're only supposed to send to one editor at a house. If one says no, you're not supposed to go back the next week. Many of us do that anyway, but you have to get it right, because if it's shot down in an acquisitions team meeting, it doesn't matter. You can't go back. Usually, although there are stories where people have. But mostly you get to go to that jury trial of an acquisitions team meeting. So you really want to have an editor who becomes almost like an in-house agent, because the editor has to lobby on behalf of the book and advocate for it. So to answer your question, you prepare a submission list. It's a curated list. Some people you will have worked with, some you may not have ever worked with. And today editors move around so frequently. There are a lot of new hires. And so we spend a lot of time trying to track who might be right for a project. And then, of course, you can always call up and ask, as an agent, are you the best choice, or would you suggest a colleague? But once you have your submission notes in place, and these can be shared with an author, you can always ask an agent you're working with for their submission list. That's something you'll want to keep for any number of reasons.
And a question for the whole panel. How can authors identify and describe their target audiences for memoir so agents become interested?
Well, I think you want to be specific, not general. Of course, you want people 18 to 85 to be reading you, but maybe not. What demographics might support it? Do you need people who've had comparable experiences? Do you need people who might have lived longer than other people? People might be interested in something like the military or the workings of a hospital or a courtroom without being that audience, without being professionals in that world. But you can also point to not just what's called comparable titles, recent books within a 3 to 5 year period that are like your book, that point the way to your readership. You can use Netflix series also. What's in the headlines? You're looking for evidence. Some of it is numeric data, and some of it is really about getting people's eyes to be opened to something that you may be familiar with that the agent may not be.
Wonderful. Anyone else on the panel want to jump in? We've got so many good questions, but yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm kind of piggybacking off of that a little bit. I really love the specificity of language and making sure your query, every word is doing some type of heavy lifting to serve the purpose of your story. And it allows you to, cull down on some of the things that maybe are a little bit overly verbose to kind of indicate what's happening in your query. With the specificity of language, you're tapping into all these different entry points to the work, whether it is a demographic entry point or a hobby interest entry point or a professional entry point. There are so many ways to tap into that audience and show that if you're leveraging specifics in your query.
I think just to piggyback on Katharine and Stephanie, it's really, in trying to identify and describe those audiences, I think it's usually most clear who your target audience is in describing them. But in thinking through secondary audiences, it's okay to really think outside the box. Who all could this reach? And if you think about like the different types of book clubs, different groups that get together, the different demographics, the different age ranges, like who all might be really interested in this, and in what ways could you see them connecting? If you're able to create those pinpoints and identify them for us, it helps us get a sense of the fullness of what shelves this book could be on in a store.
I love that.
Yeah, the questions are amazing. There's so much to think about. And thanks you guys for just kind of like giving us those tips. And now, with that being said, last but not least, we have Stephanie Winter, who's here with a query critique of for one of our lucky writers who submitted for this event.
Yeah, thank you so much all for submitting. Stephanie, tell us what made you choose this one.
Perfect. I selected Overcooked, and I love this query so much. There are some tweaks and suggestions I have, but it really taps into what Katharine was saying about giving us a clear structure working through this query. So there's so much fun to have in this query letter. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of evocative detail that we get to sort of live vicariously through this writer. And then there's just some really interesting touchstones that can offer an opportunity to branch out into the secondary audiences that we've been talking about. So without further ado, we have Overcooked, a woman chef's deliciously bizarre culinary adventures. Dear panel, Overcooked, love the title. I think it's really fun. And I also kind of would love to see an element of how Overcooked is played out in the language of what this query is about, giving us a context for why we are giving that title sort of double meaning. We have the humor of the face value of it, and I want to see a little bit more of how it ties into the plotting of the memoir. Love the title. Overcooked is the intimate memoir of a female chef apprenticed to the 11th Duke of Marlborough at Blenheim Palace in the UK during the 1980s. I think this is so interesting. I kind of want to tease out what is intimate about it. Is it specifically about your interpersonal relationships? Is it the close style of writing? I think that's something that can be teased out a little bit, but it sounds promising, and I'm really excited to hear more. I love the concept that you're distilling, both leveraging your lived experience and the expertise that you're pulling from. You're also giving us a secondary audience here, or perhaps a primary audience of people who are going to be the folks reading about the royals, people who are engaged in the UK sort of class system. There are so many like elements there that will pique a reader's interest. And the fact that you have this sort of insider's look or intimate knowledge is really interesting and compelling. Also adding that it's in the 1980s. If you're focusing solely on the 1980s, or even if you're expanding, I think there's something really interesting about the context. And what I would love to see more of in this letter is how that context is playing out into the structure and scope of your memoir. The phrasing here, when we're skinning rabbits, learning how game birds should be hung to perfection, peeling, slicing, and chopping, lots of chopping. That's just so fun. I enjoy the rule of three that you're leveraging there, the way that you're sort of building on these visuals and giving us sort of a more realist sense of what life in this moment in time at work for you is like. It's really fun and visual. To produce all that a British aristocrat loves about his food. I, again, just really enjoyed the phrasing. One question that I kind of had when I'm reading this is, okay, is this more of a memoir talking about the discourse of what it means to cook for other people and how that social aspect comes into play with the art of cooking? If that's the focus, that's awesome. If it's not, I want to see what the next thing is. I think there's just all these little details that sound so interesting. And now I want to see more of a structure of like, well, what is this memoir going to contain? What's that kind of structure and scope that we're able to derive from the query? I want to see that a little bit more, but the elements, love it. Amongst other anecdotes are the North Sea adventures of the first woman in the British Merchant Navy to cook on an anchor handler, feeding up to 25 hungry sailors, chasing a rolling cabbage up and down the galley. That's another great verbal sort of visual. A deep sea ship rescue in Panama, and sailing so slowly to Taiwan, the ship was mistaken for an island. I love the imagery of this paragraph. I love all the anecdotal like snippets of visual imagery that you're incorporating here. My only note, again, kind of to do with the structure, I want to know why. I want to know where the you is in this. If you're pulling other anecdotes, how it slots into the larger scope of your narrative that you're offering. how those pieces are all coming together is what I'd love to see a little bit more of. But again, I really love the visuals, and I think it's a really fun way to stitch together some really interesting components of being in a service industry, of having to cook for other people, and how having to do that in unique ways that people are going to have their intrigue piqued. There follows a surreal cross-America road trip with a charming narcissist, which almost ended in a stabbing but culminated in a famous New York kitchen. Again, just so wildly vivid, really interesting. I just want to know how it connects to the first two paragraphs that we have here. But all of these pieces on their own create really compelling, interesting elements for what might be in one book of your memoir. Going into your bio data and your metadata, Overcooked is my first memoir, and honestly, I only have 2 first chapters written. That is okay. As Taj has mentioned, as Katharine have talked about, like, we often will expect a proposal and we don't need a full manuscript. So having a couple very strong workshopped polished chapters in a sample is more than enough. And you don't have to, when you're querying, we do preferably want the proposal finished and sample chapters finished as well, but you don't have to have the complete book finished for a memoir nonfiction. But I have completed several novels, which I'm trying to publish. I was professionally published in 2014 with my novel An Army of Judas, now on Amazon as For What Is Ours, which won the Times Mentoring Competition in 2009. These are all great data points. I think some of the formatting didn't carry over for the form, which is not an issue. You can potentially give some type of formatting to your titles, whether italics or all caps, to sort of distinguish that what you're referencing a little bit there. But these are all good details to know about your bio and your expertise and where you are in your publishing journey. All of my novels have a strong focus on food and humor, and my latest, after taking a sommelier course, is a story set in Champagne. I love that you are threading through the different sensibilities that you have in your interests and how they're all married by this one thing that feels really cohesive. It helps us paint a picture of where you're slotting into our list. And while it's not a deal breaker to go into a different genre, it's kind of helpful to get a sense of where you want to go. So that was an effective point delivered in the biography for me. I have put this memoir off for years, but decided to write it now on the advice of my old boss at Blenheim Palace. I don't need as much of this paragraph because you already have stronger elements serving your purpose in this memoir. The thing I do really like is that you have his permission, because that's going to be another element, especially when you are doing a memoir or nonfiction. Often publishers will want to do some type of legal read to make sure that everybody's backs are covered. So having the enthusiastic support of one of the more focal points of your work is already an asset. So that's great to include. However, I'm unsure about the word count at this time. Again, because you're not fully writing the manuscript out before trying to find representation and to sell it, what we really need is a educated perk. So if you're predicting 9 chapters to be complete at 75,000 words, as long as you're sort of falling within a generous ballpark of what you're predicting, that is reasonable, because in the scenario where you have a book deal, you are already working with an editor assigned to your book who has bought your book to make sure that we're achieving the promise of the page count and the word count that is also in your contract. As I have had a somewhat colorful, varied, and sometimes weird culinary career. Love it, want to see all of it. I could perhaps have a series. I think this is something that you could say has series potential, but you don't have to necessarily have it all figured out at this point. Especially, the most important thing is having this one memoir feel like a unit, and that unit is complete. Less about series of things that need part 2, more about there is another chapter in its own unit of a book. And then it's not just men who create havoc in and out of the kitchen. We chicks can easily give them a run for their money. I love the voice. I love the flavor. This feels more feminist and gendered in a way that some of your earlier points did not. So I'm kind of wondering how much of that comes up into the memoir itself. So those are little things that you can tease out a bit more, give us a little bit more structure once you've figured it out, how those things will work together in one book product. but the visuals and the storytelling, that voice is already there and a lot of fun. And I
Wonderful.
love that.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was great. And what a cool query. Okay, so some of you are panicking in the chat saying, how can you compete? This is an example that was chosen because it's great. Okay. Yes. Okay. So yes, please don't anybody panic. This was an example of something that was really, really strong. This is not the average. Most of the memoir queries we get are not nearly this multi-layered and okay, so just looking ahead, we're going to do about 5 minutes of Q&A. Then we will do trivia, which comes with prizes, and then just general prizes because we like giving out prizes to you. The prizes are good. The prizes are, if you win one, you can have a consultation with one of our faculty agents. We have about 60 agents to choose from, lots of memoir faculty. So yes, we will be giving that out in a second. But first, questions. Okay. Oh my goodness, there are a lot of really good questions here. Someone says, I'm considering writing an article to get the attention of agents. What are agents looking for in a long form article that would intrigue them into turning this into a book?
That is a tough one because it's kind of like a chicken or the egg scenario. I feel like often you already have that really, juicy topic to be able to communicate in an article and go through that vetting process of getting published somewhere. So it's kind of like figuring out the most interesting, nuanced, and bite-sized piece for something that's considered whether short form or long form article or essay. And then how can that be developed further into the length of something that's like book or novel length? So it's more of a, did you show that there's potential to talk about more, but still give us a really satisfying article as well? It's making sure that there's that potential for more depth for me.
What percentage of your inbox is manuscripts that aren't ready? And how do you know? How do you know that they're not ready?
I mean, that's a tough question. I had actually just glanced in my inbox right now. I would say for the ones that I have, there's a number that are fully developed. I think I would say it's probably somewhere around 50-50, 60-40 ish. I think sometimes, things are done, but maybe they don't start in the right place, or, there's a lot of different things that could be at issue, but also it's subjective. So in what I think might not feel complete might feel complete to someone else.
Agreed. I feel like there's that, like, once we get past the idea of not ready, we also get into the, is it just not for me? And that's why it doesn't like click or feel ready. So I completely agree with Taj. Like there's that element of it can be very well workshopped, very well ready. If it feels like the best thing that you can possibly offer on a query, that's more an indication for me.
Well, I would quickly say Manuscript Academy is such a boon and blessing for writers because it's the perfect place to learn about readiness. But so much is not. And one of the things that one of the big evolutions in the world of agenting is you're starting to see in LinkedIn profiles, etc., agents saying literary agent and content strategist, because they're two different jobs. And increasingly agents are working editorially. Not all do, but some do. And you'll certainly see a lot of them on Readsy. And because most things are not ready, they're not camera ready. And people who come from other walks of life who have never been professional writers really don't come out of the gate with perfect proposals or material that's, as strong as it can be. So many agencies do offer developmental services. Many agents are working on what's called content development. But to answer your question, most things are not ready. And that's probably the number one reason things get turned down.
And what word count are you looking for memoirs in 2025? Or range of word count?
I think Stephanie kind of addressed this, because most of the time these are not complete works and we're just receiving sample chapters, we don't necessarily have an expectation for an exact word count.
Agreed. I think maybe the thing I would also add is like similar to the roles of like fantasy and really historical works can maybe go a little longer. In most instances, I feel like that 100,000 word threshold is a good threshold to stay under for something that is a debut.
Any tips for writing a memoir under a pseudonym?
I think maybe just be very clear as to the function of it. And that can be disclosed to your level of comfort. We don't want you to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. But if it's something like wanting to share this with a greater audience, but not wanting a family to know, like there are easy ways to kind of explain where your head is at so that your agent knows how to help better position it, or your prospective agent knows how to better position it, because it will also come up how you want to market and participate in trying to sell your book. And so figuring out what you are able to offer to that portion of the book selling process can go hand in hand with how a pen name affects that ability. So just trying to incorporate those elements into a proposal can be helpful flags.
I would quickly add, you don't have to be famous, but you do need to be findable. And there is a marketing component to a memoirist's career. So if you're going to stay anonymous, I don't know if that can work as a gimmick because you're a whistleblower or you're in, captivity. But mostly there's going to be a need to market and publicize, and you're going to be evaluated in terms of how well you might, be a speaker at a church or a temple, or speak to a book club. So if you're shrouded in secrecy, that's a little tricky. We do need people who want enough of a limelight to be able to market their books.
And final question before we move on to trivia and prizes. We have several questions around the idea of presenting one's memoir as a novel, as fiction. Are there benefits and drawbacks? What do you think about this plan?
I think it depends. I use that response a lot. I'm just going to say it. I apologize in advance. But I think, when it depends on how much creative license you intend to have with the story, how many gaps there are that you kind of need to fill. And, if you do kind of want to use a pseudonym and keep certain parts of your life separate, sometimes, fictionalizing a story and making it so that certain aspects are not identifiable is a way to go. And so I think it really depends on what your goal is for the story, but also how much of it are you pulling from fact and how much are you going to have to fill in.
All right. Okay. So next up, we have trivia. Get your typing fingers ready. The first correct answer in the chat wins the prize. I guess you're technically allowed to use Google, but you'll probably be faster if you know the answer. Question is, this memoir, currently number 3 on the New York Times combined print and ebook nonfiction list, shares one politician's reflections on her time in office. And I'll be pasting the question into the chat. 2, we are looking for the first correct answer. All good guesses. You can win with either title or name of the author. Not yet, not yet. Interesting. I'm liking all of the guesses. We are so far not there. Wow.
I literally don't know the answer.
It's in our script, so
Oh, good.
You're all so close too.
I know. All really good guesses. Yeah.
Oh, there's one.
Oh,
You see it? Oh, yes. Yes. Is it Christine? Is Christine the first?
It might be BC.
Susan Davis.
Reynolds.
Oh, Christine.
This is happening so fast. I don't know. I think Christine first.
I think Christine is first.
I am so sorry. I think BC Reynolds is.
BC Reynolds is above. Christine is 255.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, congratulations, Christine. Yes, it is the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern-Crown.
Read it.
I know. I love that it's doing so well.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to read the next one?
Sure. This 2005 memoir made a splash and became an instant classic about mourning told through the perspective of a year in the life of the author, who lost her husband while dealing with the care of her daughter, who had also died before the book's publication. Which memoir is this?
Oh, lots of people knew that one. Wait,
Wow.
you're going too fast. Stop. I love that so many of you are so well informed, though. Oh my goodness, who was the first?
Is it?
Oh, wow. A lot of you got this right. Okay.
I think
Bonnie
Arthur
first.
Murphy.
Oh, wow.
Is it Amy Lou? Wait, no, it's Bonnie. 257.
Oh,
I think so.
That was the first one I saw.
Okay, congratulations, Bonnie.
younger than
I know. I'm
Well, I
happy
think
all of
Bonnie
you are
Mac
reading
too.
in your
Yes.
genre. Good job, friends and winners. Send us an email, please. academy@manuscriptwishlist.com. We will get you your prize. Okay, the last trivia question. What is the best-selling memoir of all time? Oh, I love that all of you are knowing so many memoir titles. Let's see. This question was contributed by Katharine. Thank you, Katharine.
I thought I saw.
I think so too.
I believe it is Nick, actually. Yes? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying too?
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, Nick. Well done.
Things
Yes,
are fast.
you all are very well educated. We love this. Okay. And then we are just giving away 3 meetings for fun at random. Anyone who RSVP'd, you are already on the list. Please send us an email to claim your prize. And again, this is for a 10-minute query consultation with the agent or editor of your choice on our faculty. We have about 60 to choose from, and we can help guide you toward your best fit too if you need it. Okay. Their first winner is Katya Bartholomew. Congratulations, Katya. Many apologies for pronouncing that wrong. I'm just taking a screenshot there to remember. The next winner is Wendy Wark. Congratulations, Wendy. And the third winner is Myrtle Turnquist. Congratulations, Myrtle. All right. So we will be sending those codes to you. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate seeing all of you in the supportive community. We love this. Keep in touch. We'll be sending you links to our free Facebook group. There are 7,500 writers in there now. So if you need any help with things that a hive mind can help with, like your comp titles, for example, it's a great place to be. And we hope you will keep in touch and let us know all the good news that is forthcoming for all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Panel, thank you so much. You were brilliant. We are just honored to know you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Good luck,
right.
everybody.
Bye, everyone. Happy
Bye.
writing.